Today we are painting this boat in this delta swamp area. I've painted this several years ago. Actually, my advanced class painted this several years ago. This was my painting back then. So we are going to do a similar painting for this intermediate class that I'm teaching. I love this. I love this boat. It's just such a lovely composition. So I've drawn it out, and I've drawn it dark so that my students can see the details that are in the darks in this boat. This is much darker than I would paint it or I would draw it if I were just doing a painting of this. So I'm going to soften this shortly. But I need my students to be able to see where these darks are. The first thing you need to do is to go in and establish where your darks are. And the easiest way to lighten pencil line are just to take your kneaded eraser and just roll it over your subject. Once you've worked out where the darks need to be, you can go on in and lighten them. And that also gets rid of any smudge marks that you might have if you drew your subject onto your paper. See, so that lightened it nicely. That looks good to me. And when you're using these kneaded erasers, when they get dirty like this, you need to clean them by doing this and just rolling them back up. And the pencil I draw with is a mechanical pencil with a large, I believe it's a 3mm lead. That's one of my favorite drawing pencils. I just like the way it draws. So now I've got to decide on my colors. These are the colors I used in this last painting. Lemon yellow, phthalo blue to get these greens. And then of course I work the greens to different hues. Then I have ultramarine blue and Payne's gray for the heron. And then I have burnt sienna and Payne's gray for the reddish mahogany parts of the boat. And for some of the darks. So that's pretty much the colors. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint from my painting because I really like this painting. So the first thing I'm going to do is to use my masking fluid and put in these whites, particularly the light areas of the bird, of the water. This is really important down here. The highlights on the boat. So I'm going to take that stylus. And this is a stylus, just has nice little metal balls on the tip, and that's what I'm going to apply my masking fluid with. So I'm going to go in and do that, and then we will start painting. I'm also going to mask some of these reeds back here, and I don't like how this turned out, so I'm going to soften this whole area back here. But I do like all these little marks in the water, so I'm probably going to keep a lot of those. So, okay. Okay, I'm just masking out all the white areas, and now I'm going in and doing these reeds that are ultimately going to be this beautiful pale green color. And they should be much more lighter at the top and very dark down here. So we're going very dark this time. So I'm just taking the stylus, just making sure they connect, and randomly doing this so that they don't look too contrived. And remember, if it dries and you don't like it, you can always paint these out. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just try not to have any rhyme or reason to them. It just works much better if you just loosely do this. And if you don't have a stylus, if you go in with a pointed brush, the end of a brush, not the bristles of the brush. Now I have to be careful around him because last time I had some tangents going through him that I didn't like. So I'm not going to do too much actually behind him. I'm going to let him be open here. And remember, since all this is going to be dark, the only thing that's going to show up is going to be where we've masked. And we'll bring them kind of into the painting here. So we'll bring some coming from here, but mostly up at the top. I'm using PBO here so that you can see what I'm doing. It helps to be able to see your masking fluid. And you don't want them all going in one direction, so vary the direction that they're going in. And you know, when we come back when we take off the masking fluid, we'll soften all of this. All right, I'll stand back and look at that. Just make sure we don't have too many things that aren't connecting. I think I like that. Of course, remember, I can get rid of anything I don't like later. I'll have softened this a little bit. Have something coming off here. Mixed up my colors from my initial background. And I've taken basically a soft lemon yellow here with a little bit of phthalo blue in it, mix that up and put that in the water. And then I use the mixture that I already had here to just do a basic background for somewhere to start on the boat. So that's where we are with that. Then I dried it. So I think we'll go ahead and get this background in a little bit better. So I need my darker dark, which of course is my Payne's Gray. So what I'm going to do is go from dark along the edge, lighter as I go down. So we're going to start with a really dark dark. Then we're going to end up with a much lighter green. That's our lemon yellow, our phthalo blue, with a little bit of the Payne's Gray in there to desaturate it a little bit. So that'll be our mid-tone. Then our lightest green, of course, is the lemon yellow, just pretty much by itself there. So we're going to lay this in and see how that goes. If you want a really smooth transition, you can wet your background first, but I'm just going to go on here and start building this. I'm going to really push this pigment dark. A lot of my students are afraid to do this, but you just have to be brave. I am going to be careful going around this heron though. I'm actually going to get a smaller brush to do that. To go around him. Even though he's masked off, I want to be very careful around him. Okay. Go ahead and lay those darks. And you can see it catching on the masking fluid, which makes kind of a nice effect actually. So just always painting where you can see the tip of your brush so that you can control where your pigment goes. All right, I like that dark. Blotting there. So let's just go in and maybe make this a little bit greener up here on this wash. Putting in those darks early on. Then at the very top, I'm going with that really light green. Just for a different effect. That is very wet. Very wet. So, catching the water on the edge of the tape so it doesn't seep underneath. Sometimes that happens. You just really have to braise your tape down to get that not to happen. Then flip it back around so it can migrate this way as well. Now I see I've got a hard edge around that heron that I don't want. So I'm just going to go back in and darken that a little bit while it's still wet. You can get in these areas while it's still wet. You just really have to stay away from it when it starts drying, because you do want texture in there. So we're going to dry that, and then as we build the darks, it will, you'll see it be less obvious.